Vergatini. Smile 90.4 FM.
To fill us in on how the private sector could play a crucial role in supporting land reform beneficiaries, as well as to share insights on some of the issues hindering the collaboration of private investors and commercial farmers within our land reform program, is the Chief Executive of the Vumelana Advisory Fund, Peter Setou. Mr. Setou, good evening and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So what role can corporate governance play in our land reform?
Thank you for that question. Good governance is actually one of the key and important cornerstones for land reform because it plays a crucial role really in attracting investors and enabling beneficiaries to use their land productively. We all know by now that we cannot really rely on government to bring all the funds that are actually required to work the land, to put restored land to productive use. Therefore, it is important to try and get private investors on board in order to make sure that land could be used productively. So it is also key in building public trust and social cohesion within communities. Both communities and investors would like to really get an assurance that their assets are managed responsibly, ethically, and in a transparent manner. Our experience has been that where there is lack of transparency, for example, in instances where no financial statements are produced, where there are no policies and procedures that have been developed for running the affairs of the CPA or the land-owning entity, or for that matter, where there are policies and procedures, they are not followed. Where guidelines, for example, on how profits will be dealt with or will be shared, or for that matter, how ordinary members will benefit, where no feedback or general meetings are being held. This really, in our experience, create a fertile ground for disagreements and infightings amongst the communities, which often leads to the destruction of these assets that are supposed to really help our communities. So that really underpins why clean and good governance is really key in land reform.
And on those issues that you highlighted, trust, the lack of transparency, not adhering to procedures, are those issues the ones that are hindering this collaboration between private investors and the community?
Well, yes, indeed. This really represents some of the key factors that hinder collaboration between investors and communities. The sound governance practices. If you just put yourself in the shoes of a private investor, there's no investor who will get involved where there are internal fightings within the communities. We know that investors actually take, or rather make, calculated decisions before really getting involved in any project. This is really backed, or usually it's backed by a sense of confidence that their investment will yield a return and that it is safe for them to actually invest in those communities.
What is the current appetite from private investors?
Well, our experience to date really confirms the fact that there is appetite from the private investors to partner with communities. As an example, over the last 10 years of our existence as an organization, we have supported in excess of just around 26 community projects, attracting more than 1 billion rand in private investments. And this really putting into productive use in excess of 72,000 hectares of land. And here we are talking about private investment benefiting in excess of 16,000 households. So this in itself really suggests that the appetite is there. What is important for us is to really scale this up, to make sure that we can get more and more communities supported in this manner so that we can bring, or rather attract, much needed investments into the equation. But for this needed investment that I'm talking about to be realized, you need these communities to be stable. You need stable communities and you need good governance, amongst other things.
It also underscores the role of the Vumelana Fund, as you pointed out there, because post-settlement support then becomes quite critical.
Yes, indeed. I mean, one cannot really overemphasize the importance of post-settlement support. It's crucial if communities are to utilize their land productively and effectively. I mean, as I've said, there's ample evidence that land ownership on its own will not transform the lives of claimant communities. This post-settlement support includes, amongst others, really mentoring and supporting these communities, really hand-holding them, providing access to finance and to markets, ensuring that communities have got clear water usage rights, for example, if they've got, if the land is for agricultural purposes, and providing them with technical support where required. Giving land to communities without this important aspect or this post-settlement support is really tantamount to setting them up for failure, because you give them the land and yet you don't give them the requisite support to make sure that they are able to work the land. I mean, we come from a terrible history where we have been dispossessed, and not only being dispossessed, that skill set that probably might have existed in the past in terms of running some of these farms is not there. And you need money in order to run these farms. So if you give people the land without giving them the requisite resources, you are setting them up for failure.
Peter Setou is Chief Executive of the Vumelana Advisory Fund, filling us in on the role that the private sector can play in supporting land reform beneficiaries. Peter, what are some of the challenges arising from community property associations failing to comply with the basic requirements of the CPA Act?
The CPA Act, if you like, provides some fairly basic requirements that must be complied with by communal property association. Some of the main challenges that have been reported amongst the CPAs include, as an example, committee members using the resources for personal benefit instead of for the benefit of the rest of the community. Lack of proper record keeping, particularly when insofar as it relates to finances, including minutes of meetings where major decisions are actually taken. Unaccountable leadership, especially where the CPA is used as both the landholding entities and the business entity. This results in CPA requiring interventions from government because of the infightings, and it ultimately poses a challenge to productivity of the restored land, including potential investors not showing interest in partnering with that particular CPA or with CPAs in general. And on the one hand, it cannot be expected for government to fund the CPAs which are not well run, as this can only perpetuate the problem. Similarly, it cannot be expected for private investors to be brought into the equation when these challenges actually remain. Therefore, it is crucial that these challenges must actually be dealt with.
How can they be dealt with effectively, do you think?
It's clear that the post-settlement support that I've talked about is actually key,
Okay.
Assisting them to make sure that they can put in place clear governance processes, ensuring that they've got policies and procedures in place, hand-holding them to make sure that they can begin to, make sure that they can have proper recording systems in place. They can get their financials to be audited, and most importantly, provide feedback to the communities. I cannot think of any better way through which you can hold the leadership to be accountable other than ensuring that they keep on getting proper mandates from the rest of the communities. They document all of these things. You also make sure that they comply with the policies and procedures that have been put in place.
You spoke about some of the challenges earlier around the collaboration between investors and the communities, but trust is a two-way street. How can the communities trust the private investors in that regard? What role, for example, can King codes on corporate governance play?
Well, before one could even start getting into the King Code, you're raising a crucial point to say, how can communities actually trust the investors themselves? It's for this reason that as Vumelana, we are advocating, independent facilitation in this kind of arrangements, i.e., you do not leave it to the communities and investors to try and, enter into these arrangements on their own, because you've got the investor on the one hand who's got the requisite skill sets, who've got access to capital or finance, who can employ some of the best consultants really to help them to put together a deal. On the one hand, you've got the communities who do not have all these resources that are required, or who cannot even afford to pay some of these consultants to help them to navigate through these complex processes. It is for this reason, as Vumelana, that we provide this kind of support to communities to make sure that we involve or introduce independent transaction advisors who would actually mediate between these two parties to make sure that it can be a win-win situation for both of them. But getting back to the issue around the King Code, I think one should really highlight the fact that the King Code really represents a set of voluntary principles and leading practices. It is important to note that whilst the King Code is usually associated rather with listed companies, the reality is that it is really about good governance principles. As I've said, being able to hold meetings with members to give feedback, getting mandate from the communities for key decisions, ensuring that there are policies and procedures that they are developed and how the CPA and its affairs will be run, so that there's transparency, holding elections at regular intervals in line with the Constitution, keeping these records, clear records, and producing audited financial statements on an annual basis and presenting this to general meetings. And in essence, we are really talking about fair, responsible, and transparency. We are talking about ethical leadership when we are talking about King Code. We are talking about risk management principles and governance, ensuring that we've got risk management in place. And having said that, when we talk about King Code, it's almost like we're talking about a pie in the sky. And you look into the King Code, into this King Code, you can actually see that this is designed such that it can be adapted for any type of business, be it a community, be it an NGO, be it a listed company. So this is really key. And I think there's a lot that we can adapt from the King Code to make sure that we can improve on the governance of communal property associations.
Peter Setou, Chief Executive of the Vumelana Advisory Fund, as always, appreciate your insights and updating us on these matters. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Smile.
Smile. 90.4 FM.